Hey, everybody, it's Leah Klett here with the Christian Post, and my guest today is former U.S. Ambassador to Israel, David Friedman. We are discussing the brand new film, Route 60, The Biblical Highway, premiering exclusively in theaters on September 18 and 19. Well, this film is so interesting because you're joined by former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on a trek across the famous Route 60 in Israel. And now there's a movie about it. So share a little bit about what inspired you to be a part of this project.
So Leah, when I joined the government in 2017, I had already been to some of these biblically, historically significant places, but the State Department, forbade anyone working for the government, the United States government, from going to visit it. And I thought that was just, terrible. It changed when Mike Pompeo became Secretary of State. But, when you think of Israel being the land of the Bible, which it is, this road, Route 60, is the road where, either on it or on either side of it, within a kilometer or two, almost all the great biblical stories that, we learned when we were younger or continue to study today, it's where they all occurred. And somehow this was something that the U.S. government at the time was uncomfortable with Americans visiting. So we changed that, from a political and a diplomatic perspective when I was in office. And then I said, you know what? I want people to see this just like I have, because it really generates in me so much inspiration. It really recharges your batteries. It gets you feeling much closer to our roots, our Judeo-Christian values. And so I approached, my friends who were in this business already making films, and I sold them on this idea of making a film specifically about Route 60, because it's the road that on which all these great biblical stories occurred.
So having served as the U.S. Ambassador to Israel, how did this journey, change or enhance your personal understanding of the region?
Well, people who aren't familiar with this part of the world, they hear about the West Bank as the geographical description, and they're told it's illegally occupied territory where Jewish people have no right to be, no right to live. And to me, that point of view which I should tell you, is a view shared by much of the world, and it's even shared in large part by our administration now, the current administration. It is, first of all, it's antithetical to the Jewish faith. It's antithetical to the Christian faith, because this is land that, at the very core of the Bible is the grant of this land to the Jewish people. It's also antithetical to the interest of making peace, because the more we create an expectation that this land will be surrendered by Israel, which is a false expectation, because I don't think Israel will ever do that, the more we create expectations that won't be materialized. And I should say that, I don't want to get too much into politics, but I should tell you that, having been involved in the diplomatic and political front for 4 years intensely, I am convinced that the Palestinian people themselves would be ill-served if Israel were to walk away from this, this holy region. I mean, Israel is the only force within the region that presents an opportunity and a potential for Palestinian people to live, with dignity and with prosperity. So the more the politicians cling to this fantasy of Israel abandoning its biblical heritage, not only do we do harm to faith, but we do harm to the people that live there as well.
Hmm. Well, many Christians, feel called to share the gospel. Are they free to do so in Israel?
Well, they're free to do so under Israeli control.
Mhm.
When Israel was formed in 1948 and throughout its history, it was extremely sensitive to the fact that it was now the custodian, if you will, of so many holy sites that are holy not just to Jews but to Christians as well. And Israel, I think, a huge part of its ministry of tourism is attracting and accommodating Christian pilgrims who, want to go to Jerusalem. They want to go to Gethsemane or the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Or they want to go up to Capernaum in Galilee, and Kasser al Yehud, where Jesus was baptized. These are places where, under Israeli control, all faiths are welcome. That wasn't the case, before 1967. Certainly wasn't the case before 1948. So, and I think we see throughout the world how there are people who are not just not hospitable to Christian pilgrims, but destroy holy sites. That's not happening in Israel, and Israel will never do that. And that's why I'm so comfortable sharing this with people. I think people who watch this film will primarily be of the Christian faith, even though I'm not. But I want them to see what the care that Israel takes to make people of the Christian faith comfortable with their holy sites.
Well, can you comment on some of the hostility Christians in Israel have faced at the hands of Orthodox Jews in Israel?
It's how do I put this? I mean, I when I see that, it's very painful to me to see it. It is I can assure you, it is uh, uh, a massive rarity, meaning that if it happens, and it has happened where some really misguided people have said some dumb things, some unconscionable things, it's always condemned by the Israeli government immediately. They take steps to make sure it doesn't happen again, and it doesn't happen that often. Now, the thing is, we know the story about the news world. When a dog bites a man, nobody reports about it. When a man bites a dog, it's very uncommon, but it gets the headlines. So this is really a man bites dog kind of event. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, because it feeds into the narrative, some people don't like Israel, it gets a lot of attention. But look, it's not the case. I mean, Christians should come and they will feel not just comfortable, but feel very welcome.
Throughout this journey, which is really remarkable, you tread the very ground that key biblical figures once walked upon. Were there certain moments that really felt surreal or especially profound on this journey?
So there were many, and I'll share a couple with you. One that I think will resonate with Jews, one with Christians. I think that whether it's Bethel or Shiloh or the altar of Joshua. I mean, these are places that are incredibly significant in the Old Testament. Bethel. There's probably 100 Bethels in America, towns named Bethel or Shiloh, because people named their towns after these incredible stories. Shiloh is where the tabernacle rested for 369 years, and Hannah really taught the world how to pray. Well, it's all intact right now. You can see what it looks like, and you could really imagine what it looked like 3,500 years ago. Same with Bethel and of course Jerusalem. On the Christian side of things, what I think people will really find fascinating is what's called the pilgrimage road. It is a fully intact set of steps that connect the ritual bath and the pool of Siloam on the southern end of Jerusalem with the actual temple. So it was when people would come on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, they would bathe in this ritual bath to purify themselves, and then they would walk up these steps. Now, these steps were just discovered 20 years ago, and they're all fully intact. And what's interesting about them, they were built in the year 30 by Pontius Pilate. So if you walk up these steps, you are literally walking the path that there is 100% probability that Jesus walked up this path on his way to the temple. And you can see how it's built, and you can see how there's actually sort of along the way, because hundreds of thousands would walk on this path. There's actually a speaker's platform where somebody who had something to say, like in Hyde Park in England, somebody had something to say. This was a place for them to get up and say it. So you could literally imagine Jesus preaching at this point. And we, Mike and I delve into it in some depth, and it's you are putting yourself back in time, not just by looking at a museum, looking at a piece of parchment or a shard of glass or a shard of pottery. You're literally immersing yourself in the land that was walked by your favorite or most inspiring biblical hero.
So, Route 60 is obviously steeped in religious and historical significance, and we did talk about this a little bit. It's also a scene of unrest. So, were there any challenges or tense moments that you ran into while filming?
Well, look, we were lucky that it was a quiet week. A couple of weeks later, there were several terrorist attacks at various junctions along Route 60. It's unfortunately a place of I mean, there have been Jews murdered on that path, every every month or so, there's something that's going on there. It's 146 miles. Some of it is quiet, some of it is not. Some places in the north, some places near Hebron are not so quiet. And look, that was one of the reasons why I wanted to make the film, because you'll go to Israel with a tour guide, and depending upon the circumstances, they might not take you there.
Mhm.
And I want everybody to see it and see what's going on here and understand the importance of it. And Mike Pompeo and I are two people who, under these circumstances, were able to travel, with a security detail, and we felt very comfortable, and nobody messed with us. But not everybody is so fortunate, and we thought, well, we have this opportunity, let's show this to the world. Now, I believe there will come a day, probably within our lifetimes, that this area will become far more peaceful and open. We have to get our politics right. We have to recognize, Israeli sovereignty over this holy land, and we have to make sure that within the context of that sovereignty, the people that live there, all the people that live there, Jewish, Arab, Muslim, Christian, whoever they are, that they have the human dignity that God affords every individual. We can get there, and I think we will, but we're not there yet.
Well, how do you think this film will contribute to the broader conversation about peace and reconciliation in the Middle East?
Well, look, one of the things that has been a roadblock, there is a huge effort on behalf of Palestinians, not Arabs generally, but Palestinians in particular, to deny Jews and Christians their biblical heritage, and in particular their biblical uh, connection to this land. The literally taking the view that the Jewish people have no connection with Jerusalem. Now, the odd thing is that they will concede that Christians have a connection to Jerusalem. Well, if that's the case, then it's logically impossible for Jews not to have a connection, because the Christian connection is through Jesus, and Jesus visited Jerusalem as a Jew, right? So it's an argument that falls on itself. But this is what they do now. As long as they keep doing that, and as long as they keep making those arguments, we're never going to have peace, because this is fundamental to the ability to achieve peace, the ability to speak the truth and to recognize the truth. This film, I think, is demonstrably true. Right? We don't tell stories that aren't documented. We don't go to places that are not archaeologically proven. We don't make up biblical references. And in fact, the film is replete with citations. Through a very pleasant voice, more pleasant than mine. References to the actual scriptural text that supports where we are. So it doesn't matter whether it's to be Hebron, Bethel, Shiloh, Jerusalem. Within Jerusalem, Gethsemane, Church of the Holy Sepulchre. I mean, Bethlehem. It's all supported by biblical references and archaeological evidence. And so we hope that we can contribute to the discourse where we can say, look, let's end this kind of foolish argument about whether or not this land was given to the Jewish people 3,500 years ago, whether this land is holy to Jews and Christians. It is. Let's start with there. Let's also not debate the fact that right now there are people living on this territory who don't believe, and even if they don't believe, they're still entitled to live with security and prosperity and dignity. And let's work from that point forward. And I think that this movie helps us to, I think, to kind of take off the table some of the more challenging arguments that really don't need to be on the table in the first place.
Yeah. So, how has this experience shaped your perspective on the importance of preserving historical and sacred sites around the world?
I think it's incredibly important. I think, when I look at the world today and I see that, I mean, I certainly think that we've, to a certain extent, all of us have lost our way to some extent, and some of us have lost our way to a great extent. We lose our way because we become untethered from the principles that we were as a country founded upon, that our parents, grandparents, whoever they were, that I mean, this Bible of ours, and it's our collective Bible, still sells 2,500 books an hour, right? It's still relevant, but it's become far less relevant to many people in power, people of influence, than it has been in the past. And it's a shame, because the great values that we hold dear are values that came from the Bible. When America was founded, and our founding fathers said that there's certain rights that are endowed by our Creator. I mean, that was a sea change where they said, look, there are certain human rights that are granted by God, Nobody can take them away because they're granted by God. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Where'd that all come from? It all came from the Bible. I mean, all those references are in the Bible. And where the Bible come from? Well, Isaiah tells us it comes from the word of the Lord comes from Jerusalem. So if we can go to these places and we can preserve them and make them accessible and available, either in person or through this film or through other study, we reconnect, we kind of recharge and revitalize our faith and our connection to these values, which I think are more than ever essential to our being able to live with each other on this earth, in peace and dignity. And we've lost a lot of that. And this film is not going to bring it all back, but this film is going to get people thinking, hopefully, about why this land is important and why reconnecting is important. At least I'll speak for the Jewish faith. We are deeply connected to the land. I mean, the biblical covenant of God to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, it's all about the land. It's about being in the land of Israel. And when God lays out his blessings and curses, the curse is that you'll be exiled from the land. And unfortunately, for thousands of years, we were exiled from the land. But now we're back, we're in a miraculous period of our, of time, of life, and we're back, and we have to make it count. And we have now this opportunity that your grandparents didn't have, and my grandparents didn't have, and certainly no one before them had for 2,000 years, to go and visit and reconnect with biblical Israel, and we should take advantage of it because it's so powerful.